Hey, gorgeous listener. Oh my God, is that a new shirt? I love it. Where did you get it? And then you tell me where you got it and that it was on sale. And I go, no way, it looks amazing on you. And you demur. And then we get down to the rest of the conversation. Okay, so that was a bit of an exaggeration, but the truth is that this dance, or a version of it, plays out so often when we greet friends. Because our clothes are one of the first things that people notice about you. Even more importantly, the clothes that you're wearing will drastically affect the way you feel and the energy you give off and the kind of people and the experiences that you attract. That's why I wanted to talk to Jennine Jacob, who is my favorite voice on style. She was a professional fashion blogger for nearly a decade, and she started the early influencer network, the Independent Fashion Bloggers. She was also an emotional intelligence coach, and right now she's combining both of these professions in a way that's so interesting. Check it out. Jennine is going to tell us why fashion is so freaking boring these days. And she's going to talk about why billionaires stopped wearing showy clothes and why Elon Musk and Zuckerberg are basically wearing the same thing every day. She's going to talk about how you can use your emotional intelligence to uncover your authentic style. And she's going to talk about what forces might be getting in the way of you expressing your authentic style. Everything from internalized fat phobia to mass market clothes production. And finally, Jennine is going to talk about the one thing she changed in order to lose 40 pounds, grow her audience from 500 to 95,000 in 3 months, and to get unstuck with her style and find her creative expression again. If any of that sounds like a goal for you, listen up.
Ready to break up with your bullshit? I mean, all those excuses that are keeping you stuck. Because you have one life to live. And if you're not having fun yet, then that's a problem, dude. Welcome to Goals, Grit, and some woo-woo shit. The podcast where you learn about the habits of kicking ass at life. Whether you want to get ripped, get rich, or just get high on life, this is the place to be. Here's your host, best-selling author and feel-good expert, Una Duncan.
So pumped to talk to you. I've been really enjoying going through all of your content, and I've got so many questions for you. Okay, so starting off, this is what I want to ask you right off the bat. So you have a background as a fashion blogger and an emotional intelligence coach, and you say that fashion has an impact on our emotional well-being. So when you say that, are you just saying like if we're wearing a cute outfit, then we feel more confident, or does it go deeper than that?
Yeah, well, fashion has a big impact like on your physical like well-being. It actually changes the way that you move, like literally, because like the way that you wear it on your body, and it when you're wearing something that you really feel confident in, you can really see like how it changes the way that you walk, the way that you move, the way that you feel, and the world responds to you. Like when you show up to the world, like wearing the clothes that you love to wear, like you come in with a different energy, and then the world responds to that energy back. And then naturally there's a different synergy. Like when you're wearing clothes that you feel like really represent you, that you feel like you look really good in, that you feel like you're your best in. And so that has an impact on your mental health, because that's part of your self-image, is like how the world comes back to you and responds back to you. And also like how you feel like in terms of you feeling like you expressing your authenticity, that is also a really important part of fashion, or part of like the mental health of style.
Mm-hmm. So it's about feeling that we are projecting who we are authentically. Mm-hmm. And it's also about attracting the kind of people, experiences, energy that we are putting out there as our authentic selves. Do I have it right?
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
Awesome.
So yeah. And then on top of that, it's like when you feel your best, when you feel like you're looking your best, you tend to take more risks in terms of like putting yourself out there. Like you tend to like, oh, I'm not so afraid to go talk to that stranger, or like say you run into like an ex or like an old friend or something like that. Then you feel like, oh, I feel great. Like I look great. Like, and you're more happy when you see them. You're also more willing when you're dressed up, to like leave the house and like engage with people. So it really kind of helps you to be more social when you're wearing clothes that you love and you're dressed in a way that you feel good about.
I love that. And it's funny because you're reminding me of one of my criteria when I try on something and I'm a bit like, do I love it? Should I buy it? I have two things I ask myself. Am I dying to wear this tomorrow? Like, when you just can't wait, you rip it out of the box and you put it on as soon as you get home.
Yeah.
That's my one thing. And my other thing is, would I be so excited to run into all of my exes wearing this outfit?
That's a really good question. I love that.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. All right. We have
yes.
to get this.
And then I get it for sure. Okay. And you help people unlock their creative style because you say the problem is that people don't trust themselves due to years of the fashion industry conning us into buying clothes that we don't even necessarily like. So could you give us the big context that we're talking about here, Jennine? I'm talking about like, how did that start and how is that affecting our choices today?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So really what that boils down to is, and I just talked about this yesterday as part of my course, and that is like creativity is our birthright. Like we are born naturally creative. Like if you ever see kids, like this first thing they do when they pick up a pen is like they start drawing these like magical kingdoms, or they just draw these like worlds and landscapes. They take like two like, things that aren't even toys and they make them into toys, and they tell like stories with like these toys and stuff, and they put things together that in new and different ways, and they think of like their own language sometimes. Kids like have their own words for things, and so they're very, very creative. And what happens is that somewhere along the line we get the message that our creativity is not good. As humans, we're social creatures. We want to be part of the group. We want to belong. It's like, when you feel like somebody doesn't like you, or if you do something wrong, you feel almost this like kind of existential dread, like, oh, they don't like me. That's because for millennia, if you weren't part of the group, if somebody didn't like you and you were excommunicated from the group, like that was a literal like life or death situation. So we naturally have it hardwired into us to want to be part of the group and to please each other. So in our early childhood, we get these messages like, oh, like, what's that what's that thing that you drew? And it was like, well, to me, it's obvious it was a magical unicorn. Like, didn't you see that? And it's like, oh, it must be because I'm not good at drawing that they couldn't see the magical unicorn. And then you start to say like, oh, well, I'm not good at drawing, or I didn't pick the colors right, or I didn't do this. And you get these ideas that there is creativity and you don't have it. And this whole thing starts with style too. Like, for example, when I was a little girl and, my mom was really young when she had me. So is not like this now. But, when I was like little and I put on a pink shirt with a pair of red pants, and my mom would come in and say like, pink and red don't go together. Or, I wanted a pair of ballet flats, and they said like, oh, but they make your feet look like you're wearing boats. And so I was like, I don't know. I still don't get that, but that was like what they actually said. And so I got this idea that there were rules that I didn't know, that there were rules out there and I was doing it wrong, and I had to figure out like how to do it right. And then you get this also like in middle school, like with, I remember this one time I was wearing like white boots that had fringes on them. And one of like the mean girls at school was like, nice boots. And I was just like, oh my God, like she doesn't like my boots. And then I never wore them again.
Existential dread.
Yeah. Existential dread. Yeah. That's whole thing. Like I'm not part of the group. Right. And then like the fashion industry really preys on this with the invention of trends. And so it's like trends are a way of creating an in group and an out group. And us naturally, we want to be part of the in group. Like think about the whole thing with like the Gen Z telling the millennials that, they can't wear ankle socks. Like, it's like ankle socks are out. And then all the millennials were like, oh no. And they threw out all the ankle socks, and now we're wearing crew socks. And so, like I'm Gen X, so I'm not really part of this, but it's like, all of a sudden, like the millennials realizing that they're in the out group, and that kind of created this like kind of existential dread, and they wanted to be part of the in group. And so in the fashion industry does this on purpose. Like this is part of like, okay, what are we selling this season? Okay, this is going to be the trends for this season. And there is a whole industry, not just like with clothing brands, but it's also magazines, content creators. There is like so many people who are making money off of this trends. It's a whole industry. And the reality is that it's all made up.
It's all made up. And when did it start getting made up? Because like the pioneers weren't doing this.
No. And this is like interesting because like, what happened, it kind of goes back to, the turn of the century. And, during World War I, factories increased production, for all kinds of goods, from, clothing for like the war effort, to, canned food, to like all kinds of different things. After the war and peacetime came, they were still producing things at that rate, but they realized really quickly that they would either have to stop producing or get people to buy all of the extra things that they were producing. And so there came this whole kind of campaign with like people from like Lehman Brothers and like this one man, his name is Edward Bernays, and he was like a propagandist for World War I to get people to fight in World War I. And after the war, like he focused his efforts on commerce. And one of the things that they wanted to do was to get people to buy things because they wanted them, not because they needed them. So previously, the idea of buying something because you wanted it was reserved only for the wealthy. And now they introduce, like, now we have all of this abundance. Now we can introduce this to like the masses, this concept. And, so what they did was they targeted people's internal, like deepest desires of wanting to belong and wanting to be seen. And they really targeted that to get them to buy things. So what happened was that, what he did was he took like celebrities and had them go into the department stores that he was also representing. And he would say like, oh, well, don't buy clothes that look all the same as everybody else. Buy clothes that expresses your individual self. And so they're really tapping into this idea of buying clothes not because you need them, but to express your individual identity. And that was like the first time that was really kind of seen in the 20th century, in the 1920s, and has only evolved over time. And now it's like this, it's like a science now. They have us down for sure.
Yeah. So okay, here's my big question though. So if they've created this, this idea that we, buy clothes that we want, that we don't need, and that we should want more clothes in order to express our individual identity, then why, when I walk into any mall right now, do the clothes look basically the same in every single store? Like, why is clothes so boring these days?
Yeah. So that's really interesting because most of the clothes are made specifically to sell. And so it's kind of like, I don't know if you've ever like sold a house or bought a house or something like that. And you notice, or you ever went house shopping and you notice that all of the houses have like white kitchens and
same piece of art.
The same piece of art.
Yeah.
Exactly. And it's all like neutral colors and everything like that, because that's what appeals to most people. And most people would be like turned off if the kitchen was like hot pink. I wouldn't be turned off, but like a lot of people would be turned off. And so
you and I are like, fighting for that one pink house.
Yeah, it's like we can't buy that house. It's hot pink. So what has happened in fashion is that a couple of things. The whole idea about like the classics, the timeless classics, those are the easiest to produce overseas. And so if you can have something that is made and can be reproduced season after season after season without having to go overseas and work with like the factories to get all the samples made, like to produce like a new piece of clothing takes a lot of work from the production level, because you have to like get the pattern cut. You have to get it fitted. You have to, find the factories. You have to go through this whole like process of, production in terms of like how you're going to actually produce it. That takes a lot of time and money. But like if you have like the same piece, and if you notice like J. Crew, they'll have like the schoolboy blazer, or they'll have like the park blazer, and they'll have like the blazers. And every year they just change the fabrics and they change the colors, but they keep like the same thing over and over and over again. And so, I mean, that's like one of the many reasons why everything like looks the same, is because it actually is. I mean, a lot of these things are made in the same factories. So they're just have like different colors, or they have different fabrics, or they just tweak it just a little bit. So it's kind of like we're told that we're being individuals, but we're also all the same.
Yeah, the individual is like, buy the park blazer in green this season, so you can be an individual, unlike everybody else wearing last season. Yeah, okay, I got it.
Exactly.
But why? I mean, and I know you've talked about this before, but maybe you can explain to us. It seems like fashion has stagnated. Like we haven't moved. If you saw someone walking down the street today and they were walking down the street in the 90s, you wouldn't be like, whoa. Whereas if you saw someone wearing, I don't know, 1930s clothes in 1910s or 1950s clothes in 1930, I think it would be very clear that person is from the future or whatever. And that's really not the case now. And it's really like, I still have clothes from high school. Why is it not more different? Cars are more different. Technology is certainly different. I heard someone else say that it was because technology has changed so rapidly, our brains can't take too much change. So we've slowed down the fashion trend cycle. Is that possible, or is that true, do you think?
I go back and forth, because on one hand, like I think like the actual like literal clothes themselves have pretty much stayed the same, but the way that we style them is radically different from like the years before. I mean, people are wearing, like sneakers. Sneakers have been around for like 50 years, but now you're wearing sneakers with a sundress, or you're wearing, whereas before it used to be like, I remember the first time I saw women wearing sneakers with their nylons and their power suits and stuff like that, with their briefcases. And I thought that looked so weird.
Girl.
The working girl. But now it's like you see a woman wearing like a pantsuit and sneakers. It's like, oh, she's like, that's her style. That's her thing. I think like Emmanuelle Alt, like she was wearing sneakers with like a suit. But like, it's really interesting because like, and it goes back to like the whole idea of like production and what sells. And so before it was, in the 20th century, these fashions were really led by the elite. And the elite mean like the couture houses, and they were all like led by like artisans. Like you have, Dior and Balenciaga, and they were all run by artisans. And so what ended up happening is that there was a couple of things. In the 1960s, there was a shift from like the haute couture houses, they were the dominating force of trends from like from Marie Antoinette times all the way to like the 50s. And it was really what would happen is like the wealthy would like have something made, and then the designers would make a fashion show, and then all the wealthy people, and then all the department stores and all the people from all around the world would come and like see what people were making, and then the department stores would make their own version. They would like kind of steal, or they would make their own patterns. Like my grandmother, like she would buy patterns from like France or something like that and make them in Sunnyvale, California. And that's the way that things were made. But in the 1960s, particularly like in Great Britain, they didn't want to buy clothes like that. There was like kind of like old ladies bought clothes like that. Young people, we buy clothes in boutiques, and that's where you get the whole like mini skirt. So that's like how that aesthetic kind of changed. It was like a shift from the couture houses to the boutiques in London, and also shift from Paris to London. That's another thing that happened. And then at the same time, like towards like the 1970s, you have like the rise of Ralph Lauren. And this is the whole idea of this preppy aesthetic of like kind of emulating the wealthy, even if you weren't wealthy. And that was like very like appealing to people to like want to be kind of seen. You know, we even have it today, the whole idea of like quiet luxury. Like, this is, what kind of Ralph Lauren like represented even before quiet luxury was even like a thing. Especially, I'm actually wearing a Ralph Lauren blazer right now as we speak. But what he did was kind of hone in on these kind of timeless classics, and that dominated that. He became like a powerhouse in the industry, and that dominated the industry in America. And what happened was that people stopped looking at the high fashion people and started looking at like the street fashion and like the department stores. And that's where things started to shift and move. And they started to buy clothes that made sense in their lives. And that's basically what happened. We stopped looking at fashion as an art. We started looking at fashion as function. And that's why things look the same pretty much today as they did like 30 years ago.
And is that why the billionaires, the Marie Antoinettes of today, like Zuckerberg and Elon Musk or whatever, they basically dress like everyone, like they dress very plainly. Are they copying street style, or is it vice versa? What's happening there?
The whole idea of like men in fashion and like why they're not wearing like velvet capes like they did in the Marie Antoinette days is because of this thing called the Great Male Renunciation. And this happened in the end of the 18th century, where this like hipster guy from like London, I forget his name. I'm blanking on his name. Anyways, like he took a trip to New York and saw the American revolutionaries, and they were all wearing really kind of plain, like brown clothes, like really plain clothes, as opposed to the fighting like the British Army with like the redcoats, right? And so he thought that that was really cool, how minimal the style was. And so he emulated that, and that trend took over. And now it's been like 300 years later or 250 years later, and men are still wearing brown and blue and white and all of these like very plain, simple colors. So the whole thing with the idea of why Zuckerberg and Bezos and like even like Steve Jobs are wearing like really plain clothing, they say it's about decision fatigue. I think it's about something much more deep. And I think it's more about not drawing attention to their wealth, in a sense that they're kind of trying to make themselves be like, I'm relatable. I dress just like you. By wearing a t-shirt, I'm wearing the same $500 t-shirt as you are. Like, and so they're trying to be more relatable because there is such massive inequality today that I don't know how much longer it can be sustained. Like, I don't know how much longer the system, like, unless something dramatic happens, something dramatic is going to happen. I really believe that this whole idea about quiet luxury is there because I think the rich know that they have too much wealth, and it's at the expense of the poor.
Speaking of which, the fashion industry, I mean, garment workers are very, very seldom paid a living wage. The fashion industry is the second most polluting industry after oil. You also said, and this blew my mind, if everyone bought one used item instead of buying a new one, it would offset carbon emissions by 2 billion pounds, which is the equivalent of getting 76 million cars off the road.
Yeah.
That is mind blowing.
Yeah.
And so, Jennine helps people come up with awesome style, but she doesn't tell people, okay, go buy green is the color of the season and go buy the new green or whatever. You help people get amazing style without buying anything new. Would you describe that as minimalism? Is that a word that you use?
No, because I don't think there's an aesthetic attached to it at all. Right? And so what I do is I focus on the creative process. A lot of times, like I work with people with like the clothes in their closet. And, you know, like the reason why I was like late to this podcast was because like I was talking with a woman in the way that she was talking, like, I just wear the same things over and over again. I don't really have that many clothes. My wardrobe's not very cohesive. And then we look in her closet and she's got like amazing, like bright, beautiful colors and patterns and like it totally could be cohesive. She just doesn't know what to do with it. So people are lost in their style because they're told what to buy and they're buying, but they don't know how to make it work in their wardrobe. And so they don't wear very much of their clothes. They probably wear like maybe 10% of their clothing. Meanwhile, their closets are bursting with clothes and they're not wearing any of it. And then they just throw it all into the donation pile, and that gets put into landfills or in piles of clothing in the global south and pollutes beaches in, you know, in Ghana and all kinds of places. So it's really sad, and it doesn't have to be that way. You know, like, if you just like took like an hour or 2 hours out of your time and just like really kind of focus on like learning how to wear your clothes, learning how to style your clothes, then it opens up your whole wardrobe. And it's like things, people say like, oh, like, none of my clothes go together. Then we look at their clothes and it's like, yeah, they totally go together. Like they totally go together. Why are they not going together? They're like, these things look amazing together. And they're like, and their minds kind of explode. They think that, oh, I never thought that I could wear black and brown together. Or I never thought that I could wear this vest with a flowy dress. Or, you know, they are kind of stuck in like what they see in like fashion magazines, that they don't realize that they can actually empower themselves to style things any way they want to. And the whole thing is that with the fashion industry is like, you know, this whole idea of like, there are fashion rules and, you know, this whole idea of like, have you ever seen that show like What Not to Wear, where they like make fun of people for like having like bad wardrobes? And like, so people have a lot of shame about their about their style. Like every time I tell people I'm a stylist, they go like, oh, like I don't know anything about fashion.
They get embarrassed.
Like,
yeah,
they get embarrassed. And I'm just like, dude, I'm not judging you for like what you're wearing. Like, I think you look great, you know? And it's not about like what's in fashion. It's like how you wear your clothes.
Which is an innate internal thing.
It's an internal thing.
Like you can put the same outfit on the same body. It's not about having a different body, but one person is rocking it and one person looks sheepish and uncomfortable and they keep picking at their shirt and whatever. Yeah. Now, Jennine, I read somewhere that you used to be a shopping addict. You used to buy tons of clothes all the time. You were the person who kept filling the closet. And now you're so passionate about repurposing clothes, about wearing what you've got and about feeling amazing in it. So can you tell us about that transition?
Yeah, so it actually is really kind of happened over a period of like 10 years. So when I decided to quit fashion blogging, which was in 2015, I bagged up like 13 big garbage bags of clothes that I had. I must have had like over 100 pairs of jeans. Like I had a lot of clothes. And then I called up Crossroads Training, which I don't know if you have it where you're at, but it's like this like buy sell trade store in the Bay Area. And I called them up and said, hey, I'm a fashion, well, they actually knew me. So I said, hey, I have 13 bags of clothes. You want it? And they were like, oh yeah. So they came and they picked it up and then they sent me a check. And so for 10 years, I literally wore a capsule wardrobe of jeans, like denim, black, white, red, and olive green. Like those are the colors that I wore. And it was very, very minimal. And after a while, I would say like after about like 5 years, I wanted to like burn those clothes. Like I just wanted to burn this. I was like, no more denim, no more double denim, no more red. I couldn't take it anymore. And so I started to get back into shopping, but I didn't know what my style was because like so much time had passed since I was like following fashion. So when I started reselling, I really started to tune back into fashion and my style. And I just remember it started off like trying to curate my shop. And I just realized that I didn't know what clothes I liked. And so I really, really used like my emotional intelligence training to tune into my intuition, into my emotions, because really like what style is, it's all decisions. What creativity is, all decisions, and decisions are made by emotions. Like people with people with brain injuries who cannot tell what emotions they're feeling, they cannot make decisions. Like you can ask them, oh, do you want to have coffee on Monday or Tuesday? And they can analyze, they can tell you what they're doing all day Monday. They can tell you what they're doing all day Tuesday. They can analyze both days, but they cannot decide between Monday or Tuesday. And if you think about it, you decide like, okay, should I have coffee on Monday or Tuesday? Well, Monday, like, I have a bit of time open in the morning, and Tuesdays back-to-back calls. I'm going to be overwhelmed Monday. And that overwhelmed feeling, that feeling is like, okay, Monday, right? So going back to style, it's like, okay, so do I like this shirt or that shirt? Or do I even like this? And like, that is like an emotion, like liking, but that's an emotion. That's a feeling. And that emotion like happens in your body. So it's like learning how to tune into my body and feel those emotions and use my intuition to guide me to whether or not I liked something and whether I didn't like something. And that's what started me like really honing in on what my authentic style was outside of the trend cycle. And so it really was about tuning into what I liked and how I felt about the things rather than following what other people were doing.
Wow. So would you do that? So I want to run through two scenarios and you tell me how you would do it. So if, one example, you are, let's say, okay, going to Aritzia and you need to update your denim because you just watched some horrible YouTube that says that, if you wear skinny jeans, you're a big loser and you need to have baggy jeans now. So you go to Aritzia and you get a whole bunch of jeans and they don't put the freaking mirror inside the change room. So you have to come out and this lovely 20-year-old salesperson's telling you, you look great. And you're like, oh, I don't know. Do I? Is this what I'm supposed to wear? And they put on the other one and you're like, oh, you're kind of tugging at it. So how would I tune into my emotions and actually kind of help me make a decision when I'm trying on all these jeans and I have all this, external stimuli and judgment and all that stuff going on?
Well, I think that the answer to that is to get someplace quiet. Don't shop at, I mean, I don't want to say don't shop at Aritzia, but like if there's a salesperson pressuring you and telling you, oh, you look great in that, like, oh, you should buy that. And then meanwhile, it's like cutting into your body and it's uncomfortable and you had to like you had to suck in your stomach in order to zip it up, or you had to lay on the floor, pliers. I don't know, like how people get jeans on that don't fit. But like, they are incentivized to sell you something. So of course they're going to tell you, yes, that looks great on you when it doesn't look great on you. And so for you, it's a matter of getting to some place quiet and saying like, okay, it's like, do I like this? Do I like how I feel in it? And do I like how I feel in this? And of course it gets a lot deeper than this, because like a lot of times, and I've been really kind of heartbroken over this, because like so many people can't see their own beauty. Like they get, like fashion is inherently like tied to the body because we wear clothes on our body. And so a lot of times people who have body issues can't see their own beauty. Like, and it doesn't matter like what size. I mean, there are people who are thin and people who are not in larger bodies. And they all like, it doesn't matter like what size your body is, what shape your body is. Like people of all shapes and sizes have body issues. And when they're really highly critical of themselves, no matter what they put on, they're not going to like it. And those are like the hardest people to work with because they can't see their own beauty. They can't see that they actually look fantastic. But and I don't want to be the Aritzia person saying like, oh, you look fantastic, and they don't, because they don't feel good. But at the same time, it's like, I see that they look more polished, but they're looking in the mirror and they're so like, I see a blob. Like I look like a square, or I look like, or my stomach is showing, or something along those lines. And they're like really nitpicking at themselves. And in reality, it's like it doesn't look like that. And I had this experience when I gained like 40 pounds in the pandemic. And my body changed, I'm a small person. So 40 pounds is a big dramatic change. And I thought that I looked terrible, and I thought that I looked terrible in my clothing. I thought that I didn't have very good style. I just didn't feel good about myself. And when I went to go look at pictures from that time recently, like I think a couple of months ago, I went back to go look at pictures from that time, and I was stunned by how good I looked. Like
Right.
I was just like, wow. Like, I was like, actually, that's a cute outfit. Like, you look cute. Like, what, like, why was I so hard on myself? And but for me, it wasn't until I started to learn how to be kinder to myself and how to show myself more compassion that I was able to really, see changes in my life. So I think, like, in order for a person to really get into their style and to really develop like a highly tuned sense of style, they have to learn to show self-compassion and love for themselves and kindness. Else they're not going to like what they see in the mirror. And if you don't like what you see in the mirror, it's going to be impossible for you to find a style that you like.
Mm-hmm. I would love it if you talk more about that, because I know you're not a weight loss coach and you have no interest in being a weight loss coach, and I know you're just speaking from your own experience, but you got a huge reaction when you posted pictures of you 40 pounds ago, and you said, all the dieting and stuff was not working for me. The only thing that worked for me is learning to love myself more. And everyone was like, you mean Ozempic or whatever? No one was like, everyone thought that could not possibly be true. Can you tell us a little bit about what exactly that process looked like, or anything a bit more tangible for someone who feels like, yeah, that's me. I've tried all the diets. I look in the mirror. I feel frumpy in all my clothes, and I don't know what you're talking about as far as this self-love method.
Yeah. Well, I mean, okay. So imagine, remember a time, have you ever had somebody like yell at you and like tell you that you were stupid, or like you couldn't do anything right, or like you weren't good enough, or like, I don't know, maybe, I don't know if you ever had that experience. Like, okay.
I mean,
and like,
if people have not had that experience externally, they've had it internally, I'm sure.
yeah. And so,
Yeah.
like, when that happens, like when your boss is mad at you, like, what do? Like, shut down. You shut down. You like double down. Like, you just like bury it, and you like, you're triggered. You don't do anything, right? And you're stuck. And the same thing happens when you do that to yourself. When you criticize yourself, when you point out all the bad things about yourself, that's when you get stuck, because you're in this negative loop of criticism and self-hatred and all of that kind of stuff. And it paralyzes you because you don't know where to go. And this is why I, as a stylist, like, I guess I'm kind of like a style coach. Like, I only give positive feedback. Like, I only give positive feedback because we have what's called like a negativity bias. And whenever there's like negativity, we zoom in it. Like, I'm sure that you've had this experience. Like, you could have like 100, maybe even 1,000 positive comments, and then that one negative comment. Zoom. Yeah. Right. And you just like hone in on that. Right.
Yeah.
And so it's the same thing. And so, like, when I started to make the decision, like, okay, like, I am going to ask myself this question: how can I love myself more? I started to try to answer that question. And I started to take actions little by little. So it started with like, okay, like, I had read that cortisol and adrenaline sit in your body anytime that you're triggered, and it just sits in your body. And unless you do some sort of exercise, like, it'll just kind of sit in your body, and you need to do the exercise to release the endorphins. And so I started to do like 15, 20 minutes a day, like, not even like not even anything really for exercise, just like on the Peloton for like 20 minutes. And I probably was like the last person in the group. But that made me feel better. Right. And then it's like, okay, so how could I love myself more? And like, I'm trying to make myself feel better. So I started to eat better. And then I started to get more into exercise. And then I started to eat better. And then I was like, okay, like that, now I'm like feeling better. Like, let me get into like intermittent fasting. So I got into intermittent fasting for a while. And like, I don't have anything against intermittent fasting. I just don't do that anymore.
Sure.
But you know what I mean? Like I was exploring all of these kind of like different ways that you can kind of hack your body and to kind of like really like, and so that was the thing that changed my body. Like, but it all started with that conversation. How can I love myself more? And like, how can I treat myself with kindness? How can I, how can I show myself more compassion? And all of those things kind of like then I kind of became my own cheerleader in a sense, you know what I mean? And it's like, yeah, you're doing this, you got this. And it's like, you're looking great, you're feeling great. Like, look at all these like good things that are happening. And like, the more that I focused on that, the more it expanded. It's kind of like those manifestation people. Maybe they're right. What you focus on expands. And that's what happened.
I'm so going to ask you about that later. I'm so going to ask you about that later because I love that. And what you're reminding me of is I learned this from Tony Robbins, and I don't know if you've ever heard it put this way, that everybody walks around with a primary question, a question they are asking themselves all day. And I know for a lot of my clients, it is often something like, why am I so fat? And then if they keep asking themselves that over and over again, their brain's going to answer them. Their brain's going to be like, of course you're so fat. You're going through menopause. Of course you're so fat. Your mom is fat. Blah, blah, blah. Like, it's going to, your hormones are messed up. It's going to come up with answers. Whereas instead you go through with a question, amazing primary question with like, how can I love myself more? Your brain's going to come up with great answers to that. And whatever your primary question is, your brain's going to figure it out. And the trajectory of your life is going to follow on that path. So I think it's such a great primary question. I love that one so much.
Thanks. I never even thought about that as like a primary question. I never heard that. I'm familiar with Tony Robbins, but I've never heard that particular thing. And I think that that's a great way of like looking at it. Is like make this your primary question, make this your mantra, because there's this thing that happens in your brain. It's called instinctive elaboration. It's a reflex in your brain where anytime it comes across a question, it instinctively tries to answer it. So if I was to ask you, where were you born? What's the first thing that popped in your mind?
Calgary.
It just automatically pops up, right? And so it's like you don't have any control over it. It just popped up, right? And so even if you don't answer it with your mouth, like it comes into your brain. And so like when you ask yourself, especially like an action-oriented question, like how can I love myself more? Like that's an action, like because all of your answers are going to be actions, like, oh, take a nap. Drink some water, maybe go for a walk, maybe like, did I say take a nap already?
Yeah, you did. I think that's how you can love yourself more right now.
Exactly.
That's
maybe.
Great.
Yeah.
So, I love that. And for any listeners listening, I actually have a podcast about this. It's an early one. And the title of the show is something like Use Infinite Intelligence to Get Your Fitness Goals. And I talk about AI, but then I talk about our own brains being the actual infinite intelligence and how we can use our primary question to help us. So thank you for sharing that. And I do want to ask you more about the woo-woo manifesty stuff. But before we do, I want to bring you back to another scenario where we love ourselves. And let's say we're walking into a thrift store. So it's not curated for us. It's a big jumble. And so no one is so that's not influencing us at all. And I'm going through, I'm looking at all these like weird clothes and they're all different sizes and they're all different patterns and stuff. And so if I was to walk through, like, do you do a Marie Kondo, like hold up some shirt and try and like tune into your body or feel the joy, or how do you use emotional intelligence to come out of that situation without a bunch of silly stuff you're going to throw out next week?
Okay. So I'm glad you asked. So it is a little bit of like, does this spark joy? I mean, there is a little bit of it, cause like, it is like tuning into your body. So it's like when I go through like the racks, like I just go like I just take it easy. I make this my mantra, like what is meant for me will come to me. Like, so I kind of like lose sight of like, oh, I have to find the right thing. It's like, what's meant for me will come to me. And then when I see something I like sometimes I'll just like yank it right, like what, or something will happen, or like, oh, that's cute, or like, oh wow, I like that, or something kind of like makes me stop. Like that's a physical reaction. I was like, okay, maybe there's something to investigate here. And then and then I just kind of like tune into my body, like, does this spark joy? At the same time, then it's a two thing. It's not a mind versus body. It's like mind and body. So it's like, okay, I like this. It's just cute. But this is like a golf sweater. Do I golf? Does this really fit into my life? Does this fit into my style? So I ask myself that question. So it has to be, yes, my body says yes. And yes, my mind says yes, because your body doesn't know things like finances, and your body doesn't know about like what's happening in your closet. Like your body just is like in the present. And so your brain has to come in and say like, you already have like 50 chambray shirts. Maybe you don't need to have another one.
Right,
so,
right. Yes.
So it's like kind of like a little bit of both. I mean, I'm one of those people who really believes in nuance and like kind of like looking, things are a lot deeper than like one like simple like soundbite of an answer. So yeah.
Yeah. But I do love that it's about tuning into your body. And also, for those of you who couldn't see Jennine when she was miming going through the racks, when she would pull something out, it was like her whole body opened up and a big smile. And it's funny because in your capsule club, which I was a member of, people would put on an outfit and be like, I don't know. And then people would give them the feedback of like, dude, just so you know, your face is all scrunched up or you're contracting. And you can tell by people's bodies what kind of your answer is often there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's exactly it. And so that's why I always tell people like to tune into their bodies, because they know they have like we all know, we're all visual people. We all can see, and we know when something's not right for us. Like we just know. And so it's just trusting that.
We talked about the power of a primary question, and I know that there are so many terms used for style identity, and some of them you've gone on a bit of a rant about. So I want to throw out a style identity term, and maybe you can quickly define like what that is for people who aren't like following fashion stuff online, and tell us what you love or don't love about it. So what about cool girl style?
I like the idea of the cool girl. Like the cool girl, she seems cool. I like cool people. At the same time, it's like one of my big pet peeves is referring to grown women as girls. Like it feels like it's cute. Like it's cute to say like, oh, to my girlies, like it's like, oh, girls, like, but at the same time, it's like, do men do that? Like,
right.
Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, it's just, they don't. And so it's like, it feels like we're kind of like diminishing ourselves by calling us girls when we're actually like, being a woman is powerful. It's like stepping into your power as a woman. Like I remember when I started to feel like a woman, I felt a lot more powerful. I felt a lot more agency over myself. Like as a girl, it's like, you don't really have that much autonomy. Like, you're probably still living at home. Like you're still dependent on people. Like it's like, that's not empowering.
What about mob wife?
Mob wife. Yeah. And this one is like, this is interesting because like it refers to the woman as a secondary character. Like she is not the mobster, she's the wife. And so it's like, she's not the main character of the story. And so, it's like kind of putting women to like supporting roles, and like the man is the center of the story, and we're just like orbiting the man. And that's what our identity is around.
Right. And coastal grandma. And guys, these are actual styles. So if you Google coastal grandma, you will get Pinterest board after Pinterest board of lovely ladies in neutrals and bucket hats and I don't know what, cardigans or whatever. Yeah. So coastal grandma, what same thing? It's just like, it's a role.
Yeah. It's a role. It's a role. It's like, you're not like an artist. You're not a, whoever the grandma is. Like, I'm sure, like, I mean, you're a mom, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So you're mom. Like, so, but that's not like, but
my
you're
style
also
isn't mom. I hope.
Yeah. My style isn't mom, right? Exactly. Your style isn't mom. And it's like, that's part of your identity, but it's like, you're more than a mom.
What about even the term update your style? Because there is so much about the like, hey, millennials, you got to stop doing a side part or whatever. And you're like, no, let's not call it an update. Let's call it a remix. Yeah. Which I love.
So
yeah.
Yeah. So the whole idea of like update, it's very like consumerist driven, like, because it's like, okay, it's like the whole idea of like planned obsolescence. It's like, okay, and this goes back to the designs of like the 20th century when they wanted to get people to buy stuff when they didn't need it. They introduced the idea of planned obsolescence. And like trends are an example of planned obsolescence built into your clothing. So before your clothes even wear out, they're obsolete, right? So then you have to buy new ones. And they're obsolete not because they have fallen apart. Well, sometimes they do now because things are made so terribly. But like at the same time, it's like, do you actually need to get something new? And it's like, what if you actually really like those skinny jeans? What if you actually like how a fitted blazer looked and with a pair of fitted trousers? It's like, what if you like that? And so why do you have to part with that? Because it's out of, quote unquote, out of date. And out of date just really creates like this in group and this out group. And if you're in the out group, then that kind of existential dread that we talked about earlier in the podcast starts to trigger. And then that's when people say like, oh, no, I have to buy a pair of wide leg pants or something along those lines. And I have to buy like low rise jeans. And it's just very kind of like capitalism driven. And the reality is that you can't live your life that way. It's like you'd be like replacing your wardrobe, spending money on clothes that you don't really need to be spending your money on. And when you have like a whole wardrobe full of like really great things. And so,
which most people do. A lot of people do. Yeah,
they do.
For sure.
Yeah.
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 I want to tell you how following you and learning from you has made me feel. It has given me a sense of permission. So when you say things like, you don't have to update, just remix, I'm like, oh God, what a relief. But then you also say, and it's okay to follow trends. That's a celebration of the era. And I'm like, oh, that's great. That's so fun too. And then another one that I loved, you said, you're like, don't bother investing in timeless classics. There's no such thing. Like they keep updating the trench coat every year. And so anyway, all of these things, I was like, phew. and but at the end of the day, it's just you saying you have permission to wear clothes that you love, to buy clothes that you love. There really are no rules like invest in timeless classics or update or don't update or whatever. And I love that.
Yeah. Cool. Thank you. Yeah. I mean, yeah, it's just the whole idea of like, style is that it's yours. It's for you. And so it doesn't have to be like everybody else. You can be whoever you want to be.
Yeah.
It's really up to you.
And can I finally ask you about, someone was asking you about how you grew, and this is extraordinary. You grew your Instagram following from 500 people to 95,000 people in 3 months. And you said, okay, well, I had a very specific strategy and it was a very smart strategy. And then you said I also used some woo-woo mindset stuff that no one believes in, but the results speak for themselves. Now, would you feel comfortable sharing your woo-woo mindset stuff? Is that the, how can I love myself more? Is that?
A part of it is that, but like I really started, so there is actually this, she's on TikTok and on Instagram. Her name is like Whitney Euland. And she has this whole thing around creating what's called celebrity energy. And like using fame as a resource to get your message out to the world. And so it's like, so if you want to be famous, and so it's a lot of like energy work, based around like it's kind of like this whole idea of like with manifestation, it's like, being okay with like having money, it's like, oh, money is not evil. Money is just a thing. And so it's the same thing with like fame. It's kind of like a similar like application to that. And it's just like acting as if it already happened, like acting as if I'm already famous. And it reminds me of this story I heard about Bruce Willis when before he got famous, some girl's like mom dated Bruce Willis before he was famous. And he was like he's kind of a loser. He's like sleeping on sofas. He was like a kind of working at a bar. I don't even know he was a bartender. He was just kind of like a loser. And she said like, even then, like he knew he was going to be famous. And so it's kind of like this mindset. And so like the woo-woo stuff is people, whenever I tell people, they roll their eyes and like, well, I don't want to be famous. Like, that's not what I want to do. And it's kind of like this weird shame thing that kind of comes over just kind of like when you say like, I want to be rich or I want to have money, and it's like, oh, well, money isn't everything. But I mean, to quote like Jen Sincero, it's like, yeah, if like nobody says like, oh, I love pizza, but pizza isn't everything. Nobody says that. But yeah, so it's just, it's really around that. But I really highly recommend, if you want to get into that, because literally the results speak for themselves, because I had like 550 followers for like 10 years on this Instagram account. And then as soon as I started implementing her, tips from her TikTok, it just went straight up. And then I forgot to do it, and I just kind of like, yeah, I don't need to do it. And then I plateaued. So now I'm getting back into it. So we'll see if the results come back. But we'll see.
That's great. I'll find that. I'll get that link from you and I'll put it in the show notes.
Yeah.
And I had one final question I want to ask you that you could leave people with. Like, Jennine, it seems like you are someone who is so good at personal evolution. So you did that with your TikTok channel. You got unstuck with your fashion. You lost 40 pounds and you went from being a shopping addict to someone who is amazing at coming up with style without buying anything new. If anyone is listening to this and they feel stuck, do you have any kind of advice for someone to get unstuck and to start to move towards what they want?
Actually, what's funny, because I was doing the Whitney Euland, like, Home for the Holidays. It's like her TikTok channel. She has like a playlist, and like the Home for the Holidays playlist is like, one of those things like how to show like self-compassion for yourself. And like, so I was going through all of my traumas, all of the things that I've been through. And it's like, now that I'm ready for like the next step, it's like, I've done the work. Like, I've done the work. Like, I am open to doing the work, just being open and willing to do the work. And so, I mean, I see this in some of my clients that I've had, that they are not willing to ask themselves the question, how can I love myself more? They're not willing. And so, and then they stay stuck. Then they don't like anything that we put on. And like, they stay stuck. But like being open to the idea that there are more solutions out there than we can even possibly imagine. And like the solution is out there, is just being willing to try.
That's awesome. That is great advice. I've loved this conversation with you. I love the content and the stuff that you're putting out there. It is so much deeper than just the clothes we're wearing on our bodies. And thank you for talking with me today.
Oh my gosh, thank you for having me. It's been so, like, you made me think about a lot of things. So thank you so much. It's been really wonderful.
Hey, so what did you think of that? Are you rushing out to the mall to complete your coastal grandma aesthetic? Or are you inspired to have a look in your closet and get real about what's actually sparking joy for you right now? Or maybe you are inspired to start asking yourself, how can I love myself even more? I loved that question. And the reminder to be my own cheerleader. I mean, why the fuck not? Why do we keep trying to outsource that very important job to our bosses, our spouses, friends, coaches? What if instead we took radical responsibility for being our own biggest fans? That's the question I'm going to let your brain noodle on until next week. Hey dude, thanks for listening. If you like this episode, make sure you're subscribed so you can get the next one. And by the way, if you rate and review this podcast, it really helps me get found by other people who need some goals, grit, and some woo-woo shit. And be sure to connect and DM me at Una Duncan on Instagram and let me know what you thought of the episode. Chat soon.